I'm Kirk, and this is my podcast. Today I'm interviewing a really, really talented man and also a good friend of mine who I happen to have met through my wife. And I was super shocked because one of the coolest things I remember about him was his name. And I was like, damn, this guy's got a cool name. And we met in New York. I'm like, oh, this is perfect. And he did not let me down. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to my friend, Mr. Rennik Soholt. What's up, Rennik?
What's up, Kirk?
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. The sun's shining, which is a good thing.
That is a very good thing. And, I'm not ready for the sun to be shining as hot as it is right now. I'm still just basically went from winter to summer. There was no transition. It was like, it was kind of cold because I'm in California. Then all of a sudden, oh, it's 90. Like, what the hell happened? It's the worst. But dude, thanks so much for coming on.
I think it's probably in the 50s today. So if you want a transitionary period, just come back east.
Sounds good. I guess it's better than just straight mugginess. Every time I've gone there, man, I've been fucked. Like 4th of July, we went to Hartford to watch the women's soccer team and then went to New York for some reason. And it was just muggy and it was just so damp. It was like 130 degrees in the subway and you're just sitting there just wet the entire time. Like, please just stop. So yeah, 50 degrees sounds lovely right now, man. Speaking of which, I know you're in New York now, correct?
Yep.
Where are you from originally? Like, where were you born and raised?
I grew up in a small suburban town of 250,000 people called Riverside, California, about an hour outside of LA.
Yeah, Riverside, down south. Surf town, isn't it?
It's inland. It's a desert town.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, I'm not the geography major, so
it's okay.
That's good. I have a love-hate affiliation with Southern California. It's nice because I see people that I know down there, and it's cool. But just the traffic, and then some of the people are a bit, for lack of a better term, more important than they think they are.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like down there for me. So I just kind of go there, see my people, enjoy the sunshine a little bit, and then get back home. But people who are from there usually have a much different perspective because they're rooted there and they understand the whole hoopla of the SoCal LA lifestyle. So when you were growing up, were there any important lessons or any morals that with you that stuck out that help you today in your own life?
Morals. I don't know if I could necessarily say that I learned specific morals. I mean, growing up in Southern California, it's what do I want to say there? I knew I wanted to leave. How's that?
Perfect. So basically, you feel the same way I do. Once you're there, you want to leave. But what made you want to leave? Like, was it just confining? Do you feel like you were bigger than the place, like culturally, or do you feel like you had this other ambition that was boiling inside of you that wanted to say, like, fuck, I need to get out of here and do something that really helps how I feel and makes me feel like a better human being or whatever?
Well, I work in entertainment. I could have very easily just gone to LA. It was only an hour away, and that's what a lot of people do, but I feel like it wasn't far enough away, everything. I started traveling pretty early in my life. I started when I was like 19. I spent like a summer in Europe, and then subsequently I would go every summer. I would basically take off by myself and start traveling in another country, whether it was South America or Central America or Europe. And I think I just started to see the world as a much bigger place than the place I grew up in. And maybe if I had been brought up in LA proper, I would have seen that sort of cultural diversity, but I didn't see that as much where I was from. And so for me, I just felt like I wanted to go. Every time I came back from a trip, you feel like you change immensely, and the people you come back to are just living the same life. And I was like, I need something else. And I always loved New York. I feel like I used to live in New Orleans before I ended up in New York, and I always felt like New Orleans, though a very special place and a place that has a special place in my heart, it was kind of a stop-off point on the way to New York. Like I was making my way out here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you were born to be a New Yorker. Now back to the world travel. You said at 19 you left to go travel in Europe for, you said how long?
2 months.
2 months. That changes your perspective on life so much just going to a different country and seeing how they handle things. It really makes you think about what's important in your everyday life. I remember the first time I went to Ireland. Miriam had never been overseas before, and Miriam and I were first dating, and Miriam's my wife, and that's also Rennik's friend. She's my friend now too. Damn it, she's pretty cool. But she had me come over to Ireland, and just landing there, and you get there, and it's just this sea of green and like rustic stuff, and just beautiful hills and hillside. And I flew into Dublin, and then you get picked up and you're driving through the countryside. You're like, holy shit, this is amazing. And you realize like the quality of food itself is better, just from the standpoint that they don't put shit in it, that label everything in it. It also seems like the lifestyle is way different than ours. We're always in a hustle here. I feel like we're always trying to figure out what's next and figure out what to do. And when you're there, you kind of take in the culture and see how they handle things, and you gain their perspective. And I realized that in Ireland, and went to Scotland, and then we went to France and Spain, so Barcelona, and you really gain that cultural experience from that. And I can see how you brought that back to here. Like you said, oh shit, things are so much different, because you can't help if you're truly a person that wants to learn and is really engaging in other people and in their cultures, you can't help but learn when you're overseas and try to adapt, because it enhances you so much as a person. And that's what I was finding. Like I felt so much more at peace and had a better understanding of a lot of other things just based on the fact that I was in a different country. And I really loved getting that perspective. Now you came back here and you wanted to get into cinema, but you didn't go to LA. You slowly trekked your way over to New York. Now, what was your thought process in getting into cinema? Like, what made you want to get into it?
So I ended up, it's a lot, kind of a convoluted story. I ended up spending about 5 months traveling in South America. Actually, me and my ex-girlfriend broke up, and I kind of freaked out. So I sold all my stuff, and I went to South America. In the process of being in South America, I got an email address first time, and we started interacting, and she had moved to New Orleans. And so we were like, oh, maybe I'll stop in New Orleans. So I basically left South America, tried to work it out with my girlfriend in New Orleans. It didn't work out. But in the meantime, while I was there, I applied to grad school because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I got into Tulane with for a master's in social work because I had studied psychology in undergrad. And
wow.
but then I was like, we realized it didn't work out, and I ended up back on the West Coast, moved to San Francisco. And I was like, I can't suddenly move to New Orleans right now. So I put it off for a year. And while I had put it off, I took a documentary film class at City College, San Francisco.
Okay.
And I loved it. And I did like a little doc on like a local music scene. And then I said, okay, now I have to go to grad school. So I went to grad school and I started taking these classes, these social work classes. And I was like, man, this is a bummer. Like, I don't want to be doing this. Like, I had so much fun in City College, and now I'm not having fun, but I'm spending a lot of money to get a degree that I was like, I don't even think I'm going to use it. You know, I started realizing that all the things I was looking at doing from I guess it's not your dissertation when you're getting your master's, but whatever test or whatever thing I would need to put together to get my master's.
Yeah.
I was looking at films. You know, I was like, and I was in New Orleans where there's a lot of, social issues, and so there was a lot of stories there. But then I was just like, well, if I want to make a film, do I want to like be a social worker or do I want to make films? And so I dropped out. And I dropped out of school and I applied to a bunch of top 10 film schools, but I didn't get in because all I'd made was a doc in San Francisco on a music scene. And everyone was like, what, that you don't have experience. Like, you don't have a strong point of view. And so I started taking classes at the local city college in New Orleans. And they had a television department. So I was able to get to know the head of that department and just learn editing and writing and basic camera work. And I made a short film while I was there. And then I moved to New York and just started working as a PA. So it was kind of this roundabout thing where I realized I didn't want something because of something else I had done. And then I ended up sort of pursuing that from like a base level, as in like, I just poured coffee for people for free early on and then worked my way up.
Yeah,
So
it's dude, that's so fucking awesome because you never know when inspiration will strike. You never know just taking some documentary filmmaking class at a city college can make you feel like, holy shit, what am I doing with my life? And you
yeah,
found
and
that,
that
dude.
and that was also, sorry to interrupt. That was
No.
also an accident because I was actually, that was during the .com boom of Silicon Valley, and so I had friends who wanted to get into web design, and there's a local organization in San Francisco. What is it called? It basically supports young people and people without a lot of money to help educate them in like the arts and the tech world. Um, and I had gone there trying to get into a class to study web design because everyone was jumping in the tech world, you know? And while I was there was a thing on the wall and it said documentary film class at City College of San Francisco with those little pieces of paper that are like, you tear off the number.
Yeah.
I tore off the number and it was the guy's, the teacher's phone number. And I talked to him and I ended up not studying web design, taking the class, and then after a roundabout way ended up getting into docs. So.
Dude, that's fucking dope. Do you remember the teacher's name?
Oh, I don't. I should have written it down and had it prepared. I remember,
Oh.
to be honest, it sounds really bad, but I remember he was a little disgruntled, seemed a little upset at times. Like maybe, I remember he had made a documentary on like an old surfer who like surfed in Hawaii. And we had guest speakers every week, and we had like 10 documentary filmmakers who had been nominated for Academy Awards. So he knew people.
Wow.
But I got the
Wow.
feeling that he knew people, but like he hadn't had that kind of success. So he actually seemed a little upset. So my connection with him wasn't like amazing, but
Yeah.
the experience of having that class and being able to learn what it was like to show up somewhere with cameras and figure out how to light it and all the things that you learn in that process, was awesome. So
That's dude, it's it's so telling. I'm gonna get back to that in a second because there's some other things I want to follow up with you on. But for my career, I do graphic design,
yep.
and I had no idea about graphic design. I had no fucking clue what it was. But I grew up loving comic books, and I grew up loving drawing and copying the lettering in it, and just being mesmerized and amazed by the layouts and by the way things were. Like fucking Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes, when he laid out a page, like a full front for those who are listening. There was a thing called newspapers that had funny sections. Uh, and so he would actually get sometimes the entire spread of the front Sunday comics with just an illustration. And it'd be like this beautiful illustration and maybe one thing of type, and he knew how to lay out a page. It's like, that is so dope. But I didn't come to find out about it until I met my ex, whose father was the creative services director at E&J Gallo Winery. It's the largest winery in the world, and he's the head of the creative services department. He's a phenomenal designer. And I just happenstance to meet him and get into my career that I have today just by fucking chance. Like, it was totally by chance, man. Had I not met him, I would not be doing what I'm doing today. And it really shows the small chances or small things that you follow may follow up to be some of the greatest things in your life. And I think you going to work at that TV station was baptism by fire, because you got to see the entire thing, and you had to learn how to work with quick deadlines. You got to learn that shit's not going to wait for you, because they're doing stuff every single day and they're trying to get things turned around quickly for, a broadcast or a commercial or 6 o'clock news. And so you really gained a lot of experience by working there that really made you probably better off than other people that may have been applying or may have been trying to get jobs because they hadn't run the whole gamut like you had. And then hearing you say that you moved to New York, but you had all this forced knowledge on you from having to work in that environment to move you to New York, and I think probably even give you a leg up at certain points. Do you think that was the case there?
I mean,
what are some of the obstacles? What are some of the obstacles you had to face to get started, but then also continue to face now as far as being a filmmaker or film editor?
I mean, early on, it was, no contacts, no experience. I mean, I feel like nobody moves to New York without knowing somebody how to like help them get a leg in, and I didn't know anybody. Like I used to work at the House of Blues in New Orleans. And so I had a lot of friends who, like, the summer before I had moved, or maybe like the winter before, had moved to New York. And so I had a handful of friends, but everyone was waiting tables and bartending. No one was like, oh yeah, let me help you get this job at this, like, my friend who's doing this thing. Like, it was like, I just knew nobody, you know? And I think I didn't realize at the time how rare that is. People that just go with no, like, they have, I mean, there was no playbook, I guess, you know? So,
Dude,
so
you're the kid that took off to go to fucking Europe at 19 years old just to take off and would take off all the time. You've always had that sense of adventure without anybody. Like, it's in your blood, dude. Like, just say, oh, I'm gonna go to New York. Why are you going? Who do you know? I don't know. I'm just gonna fucking go. It's calling to me. That's.
No, I remember visiting New York for like a week before I moved here, and I was on the subway, and there was this like a tourist started like asked me how to get around. Like, she was like, we need to get to so and so, and I remember turning around and showing her how to get to this place, and I was almost like, when she stepped away, I was like, how the fuck did I know that? Like, it was almost like I had been in New York before, or like I was meant to be there. So like, it was, New York was the first place I'd moved to where I was like, I have to be, like, I belong here. Like, it just felt very, very comfortable. But I did not know anybody. So I think not having connections, and, you know, people say, should you go to film school? Should you not go to film school? A lot of people say if you go to film school, you're just going to end up making a film that the school owns, that you have to pay for, and that you should just take that money and make your own film. But, you know, something I learned when I got here is that what film school does do is it gives you a group of people who are your connections, right? So like, everyone would give people in the alumni of NYU jobs. But if you didn't go to NYU, then you're not in the club, you know? So that was another thing, was just like, I hadn't studied it, and you didn't need to study it. But if you hadn't studied it, you don't know anybody who's out there who you had a class with, you know? So,
right.
So those were things that were against me. The things I had on my side was that I was a little bit older. I had had some experience. I had traveled. I had gone to school. I had dropped out. I wasn't like 23 and totally blind. Decent sense, because I had worked in service industry, I had a decent sense of walking into a room, taking the temperature of the room, and knowing how to talk to people. You know, every time you walk up to a table when you're waiting tables, you got to figure out, what do they want, right? So I think that's valuable information no matter what industry you're in. And I was responsible and really dedicated. I didn't come to New York to party. I came to New York to break in the business. So like, I was super dedicated. I would work anytime. And I think that combination of those things helped me move up quickly, though I didn't know what the fuck I was doing at all, you know?
Yeah, but you had motivation and passion, and you hit the nail on the head when you said that you felt like you'd been there before. You felt like your soul, basically seems like you felt like your soul belonged in New York. There's just certain places
silly.
No, it doesn't.
It's true.
Not at all, man. There's just certain places you go where it's like, fuck, I'm home. Like, I haven't found my place. There's been places that I love to visit, but I haven't found that place yet. I'm very jealous of it. And it's such a great experience of hearing people speak about loving a place so much that they feel like they've always been there. And it sounds like that's the way it is for you. The other thing you said was reading the room. And I think a lot of times people who aren't able to see outside themselves don't know how to read the room in any situation. Like, they'll say something inappropriate or whatever, but and I know I have that problem where I just come in full guns blazing. Like, and I tell people all the time, like, this is how I talk to everybody. I talk to clients this way. I would talk to the fucking Pope this way. I don't give a fuck. Like, this is how I talk all the time. And it's just the way I am, because I always figured I spent a lot of my life navigating with the proper nomenclature and vernacular of people who may or may not accept me for who I am, that now I don't give a fuck, and I'll just say what the hell's on my head and in my head, and I love it. Now, one of my favorite movies that I've seen with Tom Cruise is called Collateral, and it has Jamie Foxx in it, and the way it was shot was very new. And there's always directions that movies are going to, like, they went from film and they went to digital, and then some people are going back to film, and now you're on iPhone. What excites you mainly about the way the film industry is going? Is it the ease of filming? Is it better editing materials or editing software, things of that nature? But what excites you from a movie maker standpoint, filmmaker standpoint?
I mean, there's a lot that excites me, you know. I mean, I make nonfiction stories. So it's documentary, and though I love narrative and scripted stuff, I find that my when I get excited is when a narrative feels like a doc. So um, uh, what was that? What's the film that's up for the Academy Award right now? That
Nomad Land.
yeah, yeah. I'd watch that.
I knew exactly.
Like, yep. I was like, this is the film in the '90s when I first started discovering film that I would have loved to have made. I was like, this is it. Like, she made it. You know, it's great.
Yeah.
I love the idea of like small crews, casting that isn't like some beautiful LA person that gets stuck in like a refugee camp and you can tell they aren't from there and they didn't have a hard life. You know, like very realistic characters and moments where you feel like you're living something with them like that. I love that.
That's fucking dope. And the fact that I knew exactly what you were talking about, I haven't seen the movie, but when you said it's up for an Academy Award and you see like documentaries, I thought it was a documentary that Frances McDormand made. I thought she made a documentary, which it kind of pseudo is because you bring in real characters. There's a couple movies that stand out. One I saw recently was Concrete Cowboy with Idris Elba. It's about the Fletcher Street Cowboys, and it was a group of, this is the way I understand it, so I may be wrong or whatever, and people will talk shit or however, but it was a group of cowboys, black people, mainly black and brown, that were in Philadelphia during the time that helped move cargo around there, basically like the UPS of shipping things and getting things around. Well, as technology advanced, they started using cars and buggies, and they kind of lost their position as far as being high-ranking people to move stuff around. But the cowboys stayed. So now in certain parts of Philadelphia, you have black cowboys, literally people with horses in stables in the middle of the city. And the way the film's done, there's a couple of people in it that are actually, 2 or 3 people that are actually members of this group. And I think they go by the Fletcher Street Cowboys, but that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful to see this tradition that's brought in, and you look around and like there's a horse in the living room or whatever, and it's just a great thing. And the other movie I saw that isn't a documentary but really felt like it, and this dude is a fucking beast of an actor, Peter Dinklage, the station agent. I love that movie. Like, and it kind of fits what you're saying, where you have a real character, a real story, and he's a good looking motherfucker, but the way he plays the part, he just looks like, you know, an average guy who doesn't want to be bothered by anybody, who's probably been, you know, teased for having dwarfism his entire life. And he's just like fed up with everybody and wants to be left the fuck alone. And it kind of makes me feel like he's my spirit animal. Like, I'll deal with you if you're one of my people, but other than that, I won't fuck with you if it's not in my realm of possibilities. Now,
I remember when that film came out. I was PAing for Access Hollywood at the time here in New York, and we did the what were they called, the just the interviews for it, you know, and so I remember that specifically because I remember the woman who was producing it at the time. I think I was always talking about independent film and stuff, and she was like, look, this is like an independent film, because usually the things we were covering was like really big with big stars, and this had Peter Dinklage and who was the woman?
Bobby Carvajal, and she was the woman that was also she was in The Untouchables. She was in
Yes. No, she's a very famous actress who was in a great film about drug addicts living downtown in what is it called? I should have prepared, like High Life or
something like that.
It's gonna bug me. I can't Google in the middle of a podcast, right?
Of course you can. Why the fuck? We're just talking, man. Google away. Look it up.
Okay,
yeah, there's always movies that catch your attention because of the way they're done, and it necessarily doesn't involve a long or grandiose set or a grandiose gesture of a movie or to make it exciting. It's just very simple. Miriam introduced me to Terrence Malick films.
Yeah.
And the movies themselves are so beautifully shot but they put me to sleep, and she gets upset because she thinks I don't like them because I fall asleep to them. They're so peaceful, and my mind's always racing, and I'm always sitting there. And if I'm forced to sit down or sit still and look at something, I will fall asleep. So
Yeah.
it was bad at church. It was bad at school. It was just everything. Every time I'm forced to stop and look at something, and you have these beautiful long shots of water and very still music, and it's like,
It drives you crazy, right?
no, it doesn't necessarily drive me crazy. It puts me to sleep, which drives me crazy. And I really want to appreciate it. So I think next time it's going to be a full pot of coffee and first thing in the morning. You find her?
Patricia Clarkson.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so we interviewed her. I didn't because I was a PA, but it was Peter Dinklage and her, and you know she had done a lot of independent films, and so I remember the producer was like, you know, this is for you, you know, and but that yeah, that
That's
was a very
awesome.
good film. That was very good too. I think something else I was just thinking about your question.
Mhm.
You know, I think that with the ubiquitousness of media in our world, and you know the phones, and like there's this ability to tell a story outside of just like the frame in a room, you know, and I feel like when you can start adding these other elements that are a part of our life, it sort of enriches the storytelling process. And I mean, I'm sure there's a million films that use that all the time, but I know that's even in TV, we more and more are using like Zoom calls and things that and diary stuff direct to the phone, and like there's certain things that are just part of our worlds now that are expanding the place where screens play a role, and I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and that's kind of my point. It seems, and this will be silly to say, but I'll back it up with that's why I'm saying it. Anybody can be a filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
Now, necessarily, will you be on the level of like a Scorsese or Malik, or you know, like a big name movie person? Probably not. But your take on it can be so fresh that you can start a whole new thing. And if you have the camera and you have a vision, I think you can do anything with the phone. And I mean, think of how many times I can think of how many times like I handed my children a camera and they made a movie, and it's like super funny, but like there's some thought into it, and they have to frame things out and think about scenes and think about how they want to move the story along and what they're going to do and what action needs to happen here. And it really forces people to think in a different way, in a perspective that you wouldn't have thought of before. And it's
Mm-hmm.
all done by someone who just picks up a camera, which I really think is cool. And but yeah, so let's go back to New Orleans and the fact that you were there for a while. What was it like living there, and what experiences do you have?
New Orleans was great. I mean, I feel like New Orleans really, it taught me to I was always a music lover, but I think I really became a music, I wouldn't say I'm a music historian, you know, but I mean, I learned about the history of music and its influence on modern music in a way that I think I didn't know before, or I didn't follow as much. You know, I liked jazz, but I didn't see how it connected to hip hop, or I loved, um, or I didn't love country at all. And then I found myself finding a place where bluegrass became like the roots of rock and roll. And I learned that and I saw that. And I saw music probably 4 nights a week while I was there. You know, like I
It's the
didn't have
thing
a
to do.
car. I lived just outside the French Quarter. I rode my bike and I just saw a lot of music and drank a lot of beer and like really, you know, in some ways, like I dropped out of school and I kept going to school to study the thing that I wanted to do. But outside of that, I didn't, you know, I also New Orleans, like I moved there because I got into school, but I didn't know anybody, you know. So
Yeah,
I think I just learned a little bit about life outside of California, you know, or life in the South, you know, the roots of Southern American living, you know, to learn that outside of a book, I think is great.
that is education, man. Yeah. My pops used to say, he used to call people educated idiots, meaning they could know everything from a book, but wouldn't have any fucking common sense when it came to doing stuff. And what you needed was to get that education, that culture through common sense living, through discovering things like being in New Orleans and seeing the culture there and how things got influenced from their roots, like bluegrass and uh, like West Cool jazz, but then everything moved to New York, also from New Orleans, and then came out here too, work from jazz. One of the coolest things, like I've been there once to New Orleans, and my stomach was fucked up from all the food because it's so rich and they don't believe in vegetables.
Yep.
But but it was it was so crazy because you don't go out in New Orleans until 11.
It's
I mean,
late.
yeah, it's like we were going out at 10:30. I'm like, shit, everything's gonna be closing soon. And Miriam just looks at me and says, nothing started yet. And
Yeah.
she's right. Like you went to a bar and we just sat there and listened to music, and there's just people coming up on stage and playing. And you're just sitting there having a beer and you're listening to live music. And it's like this is a magical place, just because
Mm-hmm.
everybody there is super fucking friendly. Everybody's having a good time, and there's so much talent to go around just from the music scene, uh, and that you can get something different every single night. So you say you're going out 4 nights a week to watch music. Um, it's it's different every night, and it doesn't get
Yeah.
boring. And that's the cool thing about it. I think that city to me is like the heartbeat of Americana, in my own opinion. I believe so much stuff comes from that. Like you have the East Coast, which has the hard work and ethic, and you have the melting pot that kind of goes there. But as far as like American culture itself, uh, that place just feels like a heartbeat of it. And I don't know why, but New Orleans is just it's just such a fucking cool place. Um,
It's
with
very
great,
authentic. It's very
yeah,
authentic, and I feel like in our modern age of sort of mediated experiences, I feel like sometimes it's hard to put a finger on what's authentic or what's recreated by what we see on a screen or that's advertised to us. And I felt like New Orleans had a real sense of like, this is the way it was. Like I feel like it's a type of life, like culture in some ways. I don't know, I want to say culture is going to go away, but like, you go to countries and then you eat at McDonald's, you go to other, like there's certain things that happen that like make the thing that made that thing so specific
mm-hmm.
to that place. It
Right.
suddenly isn't as important anymore because we have a shared world vision, so to speak, or a world culture. And I feel like New Orleans is a place in America where like, when you're there, you're not in Ohio. Like you're in New Orleans and and that feeling I think feels really it from an outside perspective, it can sometimes be a little intimidating because you really recognize that like you're not a New Orleanian. Like and I know people who've been there for years and they're still not a New Orleanian. But like if you're like if you can be okay with being a bit of an outsider, you can really absorb this thing that is so different and special, and it's not like every place else.
Yeah, man. And it's funny you mentioned the outsider thing again. I think your ability to absorb stuff and culture has been in you your whole life. Like I said earlier, from the traveling to overseas and traveling everywhere, you're almost like a chameleon. It seems like you kind of just go with the flow and adapt, and you're so accepting of other people. I remember when we first met, and in New York, we met at, is it Grand Central Station that has Michael Jordan's
Grand
restaurant in it?
Central Terminal, yep.
And I remember sitting there and I was excited. I'm like, oh, Rennik is like Miriam's friend. And Miriam's not going to introduce me to someone she knows I'm not going to like. And so you get there and you're just like, hey, what's up? And you just start talking. And I swear to God, dude, it's like I fucking knew you forever. It was just, you just got right into it. You're like, yeah, I'm working on a film and I got to leave and I got to go somewhere because you're always fucking gone, especially pre-COVID days. And you were just the chillest dude. And I was like, man, that guy's really nice. I can't wait to hang out with him again. And fast forward, we hung out in Santa Cruz, and fast forward with a pandemic, and fast forward, here we are now. And it's just honestly, I can't thank you enough for being with me like right now, and I'm super excited to talk to you about the next part, which has to segue into New Orleans. And you're making a movie, or you've made a movie, sorry, a documentary film called Forced Change. Now, it's dealing mainly with the displacement of people during Katrina,
Mhm.
and I believe it's Friends You Know, but I want you to explain it because I don't want to bastardize your movie, and I can't wait to see it. I'm so excited about it, and I just want to hear from your perspective what led you to make Forced Change.
Uh, I had left New Orleans in 2002. So that's when I moved to New York. I moved to New York September 11th, 2002. And Katrina hit in 2005. And I feel like a lot of my friendships, social media was really taking off, and I was keeping in touch with people with social media, and um, I just had made great friends in New Orleans, and so I was talking to them all the time. So when Katrina hit, I had friends who were staying to have a hurricane party, and I all of a sudden, like the rest of the world, was watching the news coverage, but I also was like, oh shit, this is directly affecting people that I know. And it took a while to find people. People were trying to text to find out where's so and so, where's so and so. When Katrina hit, everyone had left, and then no one could come back, and so they were like, you're sort of, however, wherever you had family or wherever you decided this is where we're going to go to wait out the storm, was where you ended up. And so I guess for me, I was just personally affected by the storm, because I knew people who were involved. I had people who I wasn't sure if they had lived through it, and the images you saw on TV made you think maybe they hadn't lived through it. You just didn't know. And so for me, once I found out that everyone I knew was okay, and you slowly got information about what was going on, I just knew I wanted to go down there and start filming. So I at the time was working on a show called Anthony Bourdain No Reservations. I was spending a lot of time traveling internationally, and I had a shoot. I want to say it was in like Peru, and I came back and I had like a couple weeks off in between shoots. So I rented a camera package, I rented a car, and I drove to New Orleans from New York. And I got in there the day that the city opened up,
Wow.
in like early October, was it, of 2005, and I just started filming. And I was both connecting with people, hey, I'm back, I haven't been here for a few years, as well as I would go into people's homes with them and start filming. And that was really the start of it. It was just like, they're like, well, we're going to go see our house. If you want to come by, yeah, I'm going to bring a camera. Yeah, no problem. And I'll bring a camera and just start filming. And some people were going in for the very first time, and so you'd sort of see
Wow.
what they were discovering as they were going in. And some people had, no damage, and others had complete damage, over the roof damage. So that was the beginning of it. And so I was like, okay, so this is going to be my first film. I was already working as a producer in the television business. It happened pretty quickly. Like I said, I came up here and I just started making coffee, but because I was a little bit older, and people, were willing to give me some responsibility, I moved up, and I got very lucky to work on No Reservations. I had traveled, and I waited tables, and it was a traveling food show. So they were like, well, this will work for you. So I was already gaining some success, but I hadn't made my own film, and I always wanted to. So that was the beginnings of it. Um, and and then, Spike Lee came out with a really great 4-part series a year later. And then I was like, well, now what do I do?
It's very odd that you would, between, because you seem like a pretty reserved person and not willing to take any risk from talking to you, and it seems like it was such a risk for you to rent a vehicle and get a camera kit and drive down to New Orleans because you have no sense of adventure whatsoever and start filming. Of course, I'm being fucking facetious, but
Yeah.
it just, there's people like you that just do. Like, there's this great line in The Dark Knight where the Joker turns to Harvey Dent and he says, "I don't know what I do. I just do things. I chase the car, but I wouldn't know what to do if I fucking caught it." So it's kind of like the same thing with you. You're you're chasing you're chasing your passion, and it's always continuing to evolve. That's how it feels to me. And your passion lied with New Orleans and your friends and people you knew were displaced. And in your heart, you're like, fuck, I got to go down there. And you hadn't done a film before, right? So you're going down there to do a film. Like, that was your instinct right there, like to go down there and film it, to see friends, and then also to capture the experience and hardships that they were going through. Now, that was in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
When did you finish this film?
Well, it was like late 2019.
So yeah, it took a little time, but you know,
It took some time.
Rome,
It took a little time. Yeah.
Rome wasn't built in a day either. So did you continue to go down whenever you had free time, or was there a certain time frame, like 6 months, 6 months, 6 months, to go down and check on people or find out wherever they ended up?
Yeah, there was no plan. Let me just tell you, there was no sort of system that I knew. You know, it was a constant sort of like, okay, well now, because you know, in that 2 weeks that I was down there, I knew I got some great shit. I think that was the big thing that motivated me. Was like I had great shit. I didn't quite know what to do with it. I didn't think it was quite a film yet, and I was working and I couldn't quit my day job. So then all of a sudden, all these films started coming out about New Orleans, and I was like, well, what do I do now? And I think I just couldn't give up on the idea that like I had some great material that I needed to do something with, and I didn't want to just like throw it up on YouTube. I wanted to turn it into a story, you know. So I went down when I could, and there was different stages, you know. At one point I was going down every year, and then I was like, well, now what do I do? You know, there was a film called Trouble the Water came out, was up for an Academy Award on the Storm. And you know, I think every time something new came out, it was like a blow. It was like a hit in the stomach. It was like, well, you know, like you're missing your boat, you know. And so at the same time that this stuff was happening, that I was feeling like, well, there's no market anymore for my little film. I was also realizing that the strongest characters were the people that left, and that all the films coming out were about New Orleans. And I originally, when I first made the film, like I think my initial intention was to make a love story about New Orleans. I wanted to make something that New Orleanians would think was true, because New Orleanians are notorious for taking apart any film based in New Orleans, because they say it was made by an outsider and it's not real. You know, like it's. So I wanted to make something that New Orleanians could be proud of. But then I realized, like, I think the people who left are like the most interesting story of what I have, you know? And so that's what I started focusing on.
Yeah, that almost takes the most strength to leave a place that you grew up in or you were comfortable in. That takes the most strength just to leave and to realize, like, fuck, man, I got to start over or whatever. It's insane, dude. 14 fucking years, man. That's so cool. And it also shows your strength of character, man. I'll keep going back to it. Like, you just get shit done, bro. Like, you're going for it. You didn't give up. And you see all these people coming out, and there's so many projects in my head, and I've kind of started on my computer. I'm thinking like, oh, I'm gonna get it done. I see something come out, I'm like, oh, that's kind of like what I was doing, and I'm gonna give up on it. But hearing this, like, is inspiring me to kind of keep following my passion and what I'm passionate for too, because you can always give up, but it takes a lot to continue or even to change. And so as you were editing and putting this all together, how do you sort through 15 years or 14 years of footage? Like, where do you begin? Do you have to have someone help you edit it? But since you've been doing it for so long, you're like, oh, I can kind of do this. But where do you even begin that process to get the meat from the fat of your film?
I mean, it was a multi-layered process. You know, I definitely didn't work by myself. I always knew I needed people, and different people worked on the film over time. Some I was able to pay, many I was not able to pay. But I think, you know, you get to a point where you just had to sort of look at who are these characters and what's their story. Mm-hmm. And then once you got their story, you could say what is related in their stories. And then once you did that, you could say, how do you put those stories together? And then once you do that, you can say, what's the cohesive element that makes it a film? You know, so it was a multi-layered process in figuring out how to make a film. Like, what is a film? What is a feature? You know?
Right. That's awesome. It's so cool because you basically gave the backbone of the structure of how to make a film, but then actually having to do it is a totally different thing.
Totally.
That is so great, man.
And it's totally different than television. I feel like even if you work in an hour-long television series, you're still Sorry, I'm in an
It's
I'm
okay.
in an
I,
apartment right now,
there's
and there's like a
that's
random
bullshit.
ring.
That's bullshit, man.
What's going
There's no
on?
way.
Why is someone ringing the phone? You know, it's not for me because it's not my apartment. So,
Right.
um, what was
You're
I saying?
squatting. That's perfect.
I'm totally squatting. Our next door neighbors actually just moved to Germany like today, and so I'm sitting in their apartment.
There you go.
So, what was I saying?
The process
Oh
of
yeah, it's
filmmaking.
different than television. I feel like in TV you can really take like a small idea and like just make it interesting. You're like, it's enough for TV. It's an hour, like here you go. But I think for a film I really learned the need for a coherent act structure and the need for themes and sound. Like it's just it's kind of a different beast, and so you couldn't approach it like the figuring out of it required a certain amount. Like sometimes you just didn't have a film, and where I feel like as a TV show you're like, good enough.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the coolest part about this is you going back there and having such a close connection to all these people. But to me, I don't know if I'd be able to do it because I'd be so caught up in my own feelings as opposed to being able to separate my feelings from what I need to capture. When you're behind the lens, do you get that feeling of detachment somewhat? I mean, not being cold-blooded, but also being able to see how to maintain your level of professionalism in order to get the proper shot or to make sure that you're getting everything necessary when making a film. Because I would just be caught up in it and not be able to do it. So how do you detach in that situation yourself from what's happening, or can you?
I remember when after Katrina, after I'd started making the film, there was a bunch of people who ended up in New York, and I remember someone I knew made like a fundraiser, like to get people together, charge a cover, and take a percentage of the bar, and a bar like basically like it was someplace in the East Village. I can't even remember. It probably doesn't exist anymore, but I remember bringing my camera and wanting to film people like, this was the beginning of the refugees of New Orleans. Like, hey, so how did you end up here? And I had a real problem putting my camera in people's face, especially after they've been through so much and they were just glad to have a drink and be in New York and be like, oh my God, like, what are we gonna do now? And I remember mentioning it to my boss at the time. And she had come up through New York Times Television and had worked on a lot of like medical shows where people are like, like getting, surgeries and or emergency room stuff. And she kind of mocked me. Like, I put the camera in front of so many people's faces, like people who are bleeding because they got shot. And she's like, you just got to do it, And I remember thinking like, but I know these people, like, I don't know if it's the same thing. Like,
Right.
Can you do that? And I think over time I've learned that I can, and that you don't have to give away your soul to get someone's story. But I think that was early in the process for me, and I didn't quite feel comfortable with it yet. I wanted to be these people's friends, and I felt like if I put a camera in their face that I was exploiting them in some way. And I've learned over time that like there's many layers of exploitation, and one can be genuine with people as they're filming them. Even though it's an awkward situation, you can still get authentic moments to tell a story that might be important for others to hear. And so the sacrifice of having that mediated camera, that mediated experience, is worth whatever it is you're going to be putting out later.
Yeah, that's so cool. I think you go back to the authenticity of New Orleans you mentioned earlier. And I think with authenticity, there comes a level of trust and a level of respect. And if you're in a situation where there's friends or people and you're putting a camera in their face, you kind of might lose some respect that they may have for you, I think, in that perspective. So for you to sit there and consciously tell your boss, I don't feel comfortable doing this, and it really shows the testament to you of the person you are. You weren't looking to make a buck. You weren't looking to exploit the people you knew. You were looking to actually capture what they're going through. And I think after time, people will see if you're being real with them or not. When
Mhm.
you're dealing with New Orleans, is that right? Am I saying it wrong?
New Orleanians.
New Orleanians, and they know if you're being real or not. You said it. They know if someone's filmed from there. They know if you're real or not. And there's people who live there who still aren't New Orleanians. And so you knew that going into it. So you can't sit there and treat them like you would treat everybody else because A, that you're friends, and B, you think that it's one of the most authentic places on the planet.
Mm.
And it's such a great it's such a great testament to your once again your ability to be a chameleon and adapt. I'm talking to you and I'm seeing like that's your superpower is your ability to just fucking go and adapt to whatever your situation you're in, and I love it. Um, yeah. So when is the film?
Let me
Yeah.
before you ask the next question. I
Mhm.
think I think a thing to also consider when you're dealing with sort of docs and cameras and um, I like anybody else want people to like me, right? Like we all as human beings, like we want to connect with people and be like, oh, that's a
For the
likable
most
guy.
part, for the
For the
most
most
part,
part,
some people are
for the
like
most
fuck you, right?
Sure, sure. But but I think you when you have a camera, someone might not like that. But then the question is, do you disagree? And do you think that what you're getting has like a greater purpose? And can you put aside, they might not like this, but this uncomfortable moment might create something that is worthy in the
Mm,
future, you know? So it's like, I don't want that camera in my face. Okay, so I'll put it down. But then now let's have a discussion about why I actually think this is important to have here. And that comes with like there's a little bit of headbutting that might go on, and then someone might agree. I've come to that place in my career where I could like someone might agree, okay, I go ahead now, go ahead, we've had that connection, so now go ahead. But it's not just pure exploitation. It's like you have to be true to yourself and with the person, that there's this reason that you're doing it, and then it might not be comfortable, but you have to go through that experience with them. And I think
yeah.
that's an important part of the process.
Yeah, it's trust. Like you basically broke down having someone trust you to capture a moment. Like because there's always some interpretation. Whatever fucking word I'm thinking about. There's always some type of caution in you if someone puts a camera in your face. Like, what are you doing? But you, in essence, were trying to gain their trust in order for them to actually open up and be real. And that's I think that we're kind of saying the same thing, but you said it much better. And you're the professional that does this all the time. Uh, so when you said right now, we were talking earlier, you said that you're trying to get it forced change
Mhm.
out right now for first through educational channels, I believe. But
Yep.
when can we see this film? I'm super excited about it, and I would love to see it.
Yeah, I mean, it is played. It's interesting since the film uh, had been in two film festivals, one in late 2019 here in New York City, and one in Mississippi in early 2020, and then the world shut down. In both of those festivals, it won Best Feature Doc, which I was very happy about. And so, and then it just like it kind of stopped. And but then what happened is it started playing online on online festivals, but it hasn't played in like top 10 like Sundance and Tribeca. It's played in smaller festivals, and their ability to sort of help the filmmaker or help it be a good experience as an online film festival experience varies. A lot of places just couldn't pivot and make it a valuable experience. But it's played, and then when it has played, a lot of times it's been available. It's kind of like if you get a link and you can pay $5, like you can see the film. Now I'm sort of reaching a point where I've been in talks with a couple of different educational distributors. One is Bullfrog, which I hope that they want it. They're one of the largest environmental educational distributors in the country, and so I'm going to start with that. I'm going to start with getting it out to an educational market. It's not necessarily for the public, because if you want to see it, it ends up costing like $200. So it'll be available, but like unless you have a classroom and it can be written off by the university, you probably don't want to pay that money. Um, I have been in discussion with PBS, so I'm hoping next to actually do a broadcast, a PBS broadcast.
Wow.
That would be the next step. And then after that, I would look at a streaming deal because you want to be a little careful. I don't want to do a streaming deal, not get too much up front, and then it's available, but it's kind of over because they take all the rights, So I'm trying to do it like an independent documentary, like a business. Like we start here, we move here, and then we go bigger. So it might be a little bit before it's readily available for a streaming audience. But I hope within the next year.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I know that's very vague, but I feel
man.
What happens, you spend 14 years making a film and then you don't want to just like have only your mom see it, right? Like you want somebody else to see it and you want to build an audience, and all that stuff is its own beast. Like I'm in the middle of like marketing, distribution, and it's hard. It's hard.
Man, you spent 14 years. What's another year to wait to get it done properly, to distribute it properly? That makes perfect sense. I just thought of one more question, and it's going to be a little bit of a segue / commentary.
Mm-hmm.
But I was thinking about the difference between my favorite film and a well-made film. Now, for me, my favorite film, my favorite movie of all time is Goodfellas.
Okay.
And the reason why I like Goodfellas is just because I fucking love Goodfellas. If it's on anytime, I'll watch it. I just seriously love that movie. And it's my favorite film of all. It's my favorite film of all time, but it's the best movie I've ever seen. And I have to say, no, it's not the best movie I've ever seen. It's my favorite film of all time. One of the best movies I've ever seen, just from a cinematography perspective and viewing it and the way the shots are done, is The Fall by Tarsem.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what that is, or have you heard of it?
I don't know it.
It has Lee Pace in it. He's the main character, but he's an American and he gets injured doing a stunt for Hollywood, and he's held up in a place where this little girl interprets his story. And basically it's the little girl's interpretation, I think she's Russian, of his story. So he's talking about Indians referencing Native Americans, but she sees it as Indian people and from India. And it tells her story and the colors in it and all the spots he went. Like he went to Greece to film, he went all these different places, but the palette is just fucking unbelievable. And the way he composes shots and how he handles frames and things of that nature is like, it's such a beautiful film.
Who's the director?
Tarsem, Tarsem, Tarsem Singh, and it's called.
Oh yeah. That's the guy who did like The Life of Pi, didn't he?
Yes, I think so. Mm-hmm. I think so. But that movie, dude, it starts off with I think Beethoven's Seventh, and it shows how the accident happens. It's all in black and white. And it's in slow motion. It shows things falling and moving. It's just so dramatic. And then from there on out, it just goes into a plain Jane telling of a story from Lee Pace's character's point of view, and in this vivid, bright, colorful, beautiful thing of this little girl's imagination. And it's so well done. Oh, so for me, Goodfellas would probably be my favorite film. My favorite movie, but probably the best film I've seen, just from a cinematography perspective, and just you can watch with the sound off and just geek out. Is The Fall. Now for you, do you have that distinction for favorite movie and the best movie you've seen?
I mean, I love The Matrix. I watch The Matrix all the time. Like I'll sometimes just like put on like the first scene just so, and then go to bed,
it's so good.
That was a mind-blowing film for me many years ago, and I still love it. But that's definitely not the best film, but it's a great film.
Right, it's your favorite film. Yeah,
it's one of my favorite films.
So now the best film you've seen made. So that's your favorite favorite movie. Like, what's the best film or movie you've seen made that really sticks with you?
It's so hard to see. I mean, I love docs, big docs, and there's a doc called the Act of Killing by Joshua Oppenheimer. He's an American, I think from like Austin or something, but lives in Europe, and he made this film about uh, the Indonesian genocides, which is just like, it sounds super dark. It is so like he so there's all these arguments over what makes a doc, what's a reality show, like how much is produced, how fake is it, how real is it, if the camera's in the room does it affect the person, like there's all this discussion about what makes something real or a documentary. And something he did was like, he ended up interfering a little bit. He got the people who lived in Indonesia who had committed these atrocities to be part of a play where they acted it out, and you watched them be like act out this stuff, but then in the process they had this like, they would break down. Like this one main character ends up breaking down because he realizes in the process of acting it out what he had done. Like, oh my god, it's crazy. It's
Wow.
crazy. It's really intense but beautifully shot. And there's two films in the series. He made a second one which I thought was not quite as good, where like one of the people whose whole family had been killed ends up like going to speak to these people and like confront them. But Joshua Oppenheimer, The Act of Killing, it was an amazing documentary. It was up for an Academy Award. It didn't win, but it was amazing.
Oh wow, that's crazy. It's almost like an artistic piece, meaning
Sure.
like he had a little manipulation, but he framed it so well to where he had people participating in their own atrocity while making art. That's pretty crazy. The Matrix 4. Speaking of the Matrix, the first, okay,
It's coming out, right? It's coming out.
yeah, December. But
Okay.
the Matrix, I specifically remember being in a theater and watching the trailer. It's like, what is the Matrix? And I think it might be Lawrence Fishburne doing the voiceover. And I remember seeing all this stuff, but then they ended that shit on bullet time, of Keanu's bullet time, where he leans back. It's the first time like you see the camera catch one shot from the 360 degrees.
Yes.
And I was like, what the fuck was that? I need to see this movie. Didn't know anything about it, but just from like the 30-second trailer or whatever, I was like, holy shit, I need to see this movie. And it still holds up. I mean, you watch it today and it's like, this is a solid film. The Wachowskis know what the fuck they're doing. Like, this is a really well-made film. And I agree with you. I have it, the box set. I have it, of course, on HBO Max now. But if I'm ever bored or needed something just as background noise, I'll flick that on and work.
Yeah.
So good call, man. Good call. Well,
Very good.
I am officially out of shit to say to you or talk about, and we've been doing this for an hour. Hard to believe, isn't it? Just flies by. Just flies by, doesn't it? So much fun.
It does. Oh, it was great.
Yeah. So Rennik, thank you so much. You guys, Rennik, can you give a plug as to where people can find the website that talked about your new documentary Forced Change, and where they can go to either donate or keep following it or learn more about it? Would you mind doing that for me?
Yeah, so forcedchange.com is the website. It shows where the film is played and has the trailer, and eventually we'll probably sell the film on there, but not yet. But you can also go to I didn't come prepared.
It's okay, man. It's not like I sent you questions beforehand or anything.
I know you sent it, but you didn't tell me you're going to ask my social media, So,
that's the magic of this, It's
so Forced Change documentary on Facebook, or Forced Change doc on Instagram as well, if you want to follow it. And that's where the information will come out when it's actually going to be available.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, dude. I seriously appreciate you coming on here more than you'll know. And I'm so happy to have heard your story. This is why I do this, is because I love talking to people I like or admire. And no matter what you do, there's always someone or something that you can say that really speaks towards your talent and why you are the person who you are. So that's it, man. I really appreciate it. Until next time.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for giving me the time to chat.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. Of course. Okay. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. As my pops used to say, don't be afraid to try. Failures only make you better. Take it easy. And we're done. Okay. Dude, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it. Now I have to do all the fucking